It's Bernie Snadden, and look, I've enjoyed Merle's company so much. She's a lovely girl, and what a great back scratcher and cuddler. Oh God, she gives you the greatest cuddle. It's wonderful. All right, look, good luck, and I hope I get to see her in years to come.
Merle, I used to love coming over and visiting Merle. We used to have a great banter, and it went on for hours over night time. But she'd outdrink me with her wine, and I'd give up drinking in the finish because I couldn't keep up with her. She was just bantering away too much for me.
Hi, I'm Rob Thompson, known Merle for a lot of years, and we've had some pretty good parties here, just the three of us, and drinking red wine and telling tall stories. And apart from that, Merle is one in a million. She's a great person, and when I first met her I didn't understand her, but by gee, it didn't take long to know where you are with her. Thanks.
G'day, I'm Laurie, and I was just saying to Ronnie that over the couple of decades that I've lived on the island, the one constant that I could always rely on was the friendship of both Merle and Ron. It meant a lot to me through various stages of my life here, and it's a very sad day for me, and I thank you for the chance to remember her with friends. Thank you.
My name's Anne. I guess my happy memories of Merle are from probably about 30 years ago. She used to come over and my husband used to teach her the computer. And in the afternoon, I used to teach her Photoshop. And we used to have lunch sort of in between, and we used to have a laugh.
Oh God, Valerie, I'm with Rob Thompson, and I met Merle at the library, and she's been a great friend to me. She's a lovely person. She was beautiful.
I'm driving.
My name's Stephen Ronald George Bowden, and I've got a couple of scores to settle on that matter. I'm Ron and Merle's eldest son, and on behalf of Dad, Max, Susan and Neville, I have a few words to say in celebration of the life of our mum. Merle was born in Inverell in 1938 to parents George and Sarah Donoghue. Sarah Donoghue nee Pratt, our much beloved grandma. Mum was the middle of 7 children, Jack, George Jr., Gwen, and then a gap of 10 years to Merle, who was followed by Edith, Jeffrey and Mervyn. By the time Merle was 10 years old, only her and the 3 younger children were at home, as the other 3 had found work and moved away. Such was the want in the day. Sarah Donoghue was George's second wife, and he was 20-something years older than her. And when Mum was 14, her father died. And because Mum was the oldest one at home, she took the responsibility of helping her mother run the household. And these were tough times, according to my Uncle Mervyn. Merle was like a second mum to her younger sister and brothers. As kids, they didn't have many material things, but as Mervyn recalls, they had each other and spent much of the time down in the creeks and gullies, catching yabbies, swimming, and picking is probably a better word than pinching, picking almonds at a deserted farm. Now those yabbies were a delicacy because even though the eldest brother, Jack, who was a shearer and worked away, would send the bulk of his pay home to Grandma, sometimes meals of little more than bread and gravy was what the family had. And in the mornings, the several miles to school were covered on foot, sometimes shoeless, or a shared horseback if a neighbour happened past. Merle was the only one who liked school. and went right through to 5th year, which in those days was as far as you could go. During her last year of school, Merle was diagnosed with a bone cancer in her leg, and the bone had to be removed, scraped of the cancer and put back in. A pretty major operation in those days, and the healing process took all year, which sadly put an end to Mum completing a final year of high school. At the end of her school years, Merle soon found herself a job as a governess on a property even further to the west, and a year or two later landed a job in Sydney working for the Royal Far West Children's Home. This would have been around 1958, and Sydney was a happening place. Late that year, Merle went out with some friends to Bondi for a night of dancing, and she met Ron. The two got along pretty well, and after a few dances, and maybe a beer or two, Ron asked Merle for a phone number. Well, Dad was walking on air all the way home that night, and he told his housemate, "I've just met the girl I'm going to marry." And his flatmate scoffed. But on Anzac Day in 1959, Ron did marry Merle, and I'm not sure the flatmate was invited either. Now, fast forward a few years, and Ron and Merle were living on the south coast of New South Wales with a growing family of 3 healthy kids and 1 on the way. And it would eventuate that the closest that any of us were born from each other, the furthest was 14 months and the closest was 10 months. And I know there'd be a one-liner or two in that, but I'll leave it alone. One story Merle liked to tell about us was when Dad was at work, actually. We were sitting on the jetty at Greenville Point, and that's in the Shoalhaven. And we're sitting on a blanket when suddenly toddler Susan took off full speed down the short jetty. Merle was no chance of catching her as she was nearly full term with Neville, and he's a big baby. But fortunately, Max and I hauled her in with inches to spare. If she'd reached the end, none of us would have been able to swim to save her. Watching us run that day may have filled Merle with pride, but probably also made her realise that she was not raising athletes. which is maybe why Mum and Dad were so keen to give us a good education, a good schooling, and they always ensured we had plenty of encyclopedia, plenty of reference books, library books and novels. We were a family of readers. In fact, Neville loved to read so much, you'd find him spending hours and hours reading Gregory's Street Directory of Greater Sydney. 1969 edition. I bet right now he could still tell you the quickest way from Leichhardt to Bankstown. And Merle's own taste in reading was as broad as broad. Anything from transcendental meditation, treatises on Buddhism, various types of political treatises and alternative health and world theories, and of course, a good novel or two. But back to the South Coast. Mum and Dad's dream then was like so many other Aussie couples, and that's to put the family into a home of their own. Of course, in those days, a home loan was very hard to get. You had to save 30 or 40% of the house price as a deposit and then wait your turn to be allowed to borrow the rest. So once the 4 of us kids were born, Mum went back to work. And in time, she and Ron built us a brand new home at Shoalhaven Heads, and we even had our own telephone. Just as an aside, Merle remembers that telephone number, and she remembers every single telephone number that we as a family ever had since. And she could recite them, even after a couple of scotches. It was in Shoalhaven Heads that Merle got involved in the community for the first time, joining and ultimately chairing the local Progress Association. She also obtained her Justice of the Peace qualifications, which was a community role she maintained for nearly 60 years. And now the 4 of us kids remember Christmas 1973 quite fondly. Mum was working as a bookkeeper at the Ex-Services Club in Nowra, and she was in the staff Christmas club. She'd been putting in $1 a week all year, and her and Ron set off for the big December cash draw with Mum saying, "I'm going to win it. I can feel it in my bones." And I think we were young enough that we actually believed her. But win it she did. $2,000 first prize, and what a Christmas that was. New dragsters all around. So I think we can thank Mum that we're a family of positive thinkers. I knew that'd bring a laugh. I thought it would come from you, Dad. By this time, in the early 70s, Merle's mother, 3 of her brothers, 2 of her sisters and all of their families had moved to the south coast as well. The place was full of Donohues. We had family all around the joint. But unfortunately, work for Dad had dried up and we moved up to the Sutherland Shire in Sydney. And we had a happy childhood around Cronulla. We all made great friends. Dad and Mum had good employment. They'd managed to buy into the Sydney property market at the right time. And our house was right near the Cronulla Sharks' home ground. And we always had people coming and going. We always had big barbecues and cook-ups. We even had the odd piss-up. The family will all know the story of when Merle had made lunch for a gaggle of teenagers who were around during the school holidays, and she remarked to one of our mates, "You're such a well-mannered boy, Grant." And he immediately responded, "Not to mention well hung, Mr. Bowden."
Sorry.
You're right.
Don't be sorry. Thank God we caught you.
Sorry if I hurt you.
Poor Mum didn't know where to look, but she was shaking with laughter. Ron and Merle moved to Macleay Island just on 20 years ago. It's a round number. A much smaller population and many less services back then, but just as tight-knit and supportive a community as it is now. And they fitted right in. Mum was on the Macleay Island Progress Association. She was involved in Macleay Island Players, the Island Writers, and of course continued a JP service all around the island. She even did a bit of computer training, mostly to people younger than herself. And that was Merle in a nutshell. Involved, giving, popular with her friends, popular with our friends. Always busy, always keen for a chat and a laugh. Never one to dwell on the negative. Our family was well shaped by her. She taught us honesty, community, and respect for our elders. She taught us to value a dollar, but to share with those in need if you could. And she certainly taught us to laugh at ourselves. She had a great sense of humour. She never held a grudge, and she'd never start a fight. Well, I say a fight, but starting an argument, that's another story. Folks, you're...
Hi, I'm Gwen, and what I remember most about Merle is she gives the best cuddles in the world.
Hi, I'm Natalie, and I remember Merle for just so many beautiful reasons. She was like a second mum to me, always gave me a hug when I needed it, and a stern bit of advice when I needed it. But all in all, she's a beautiful angel who graced our islands, and we were blessed to have her, and she's still here. And I'll always miss her, but we'll always have the beautiful memories.
Ronnie, everyone's going to say they remember Merle's hugs, but I'm going to I remember more than anything the love the two of you share, and how sweet, and we love you, darling. God bless you.